Wow, that's very long. Of senior level experience, investigation, and extensive expertise in corporate risk strategies, including the development of management of anti-bribery programs, the investigation of complex frauds, embezzlement, corruption, and other serious crime activity in private sectors, government agencies. During his career, he had worked with the world best 100 Fortune, the known Fortune 100 companies. Wow. In numerous countries in and outside Asia. He's significant expert in design, build, and management of corporate risk programs. And he also provides solutions for many high-profile complex investigation assignments involving bank integrity, all sorts of business crimes such as anti-bribery and corruption. Has been worked here and there in all over Asia-Pacific region, including Hong Kong, Korea, and China. Great to have you here in this session, Robert. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Our second speaker, you can see Mr. Zafar Anjum. Sir, thank you for coming, sir. He has built an impressive 30 years of experience in anti-corruption and compliance risk management, fraud prevention, protective integrity, security, and compliance. He's a highly respected professional in the field. And then as a trusted authority of anti-bribery and corruption. And he was involved with many government agencies, industries, and creating stable, secure network across the changing global market. Mr. Zafar also often to be first global investigator on the scene when the multinational EMEA, stand for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, sir, and corporations seek to close compliance of security gap. He has been given advisors to government bodies, international companies all over the world, and recently he was crowned as the power player, exceptional expert on investigation and white-collar crime, by the financial worldwide. Wow, that's honor. It's congratulations and thank you for coming.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.
Now let's begin.
Hello, Robert.
Yeah.
That's an excellent resume you have there. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay, Robert. Okay, let me start with the first question to you. I've been working for almost 30 years in many companies, multinational companies. I know some employees, they are using runners, middlemen, agents to make personal dealings. What the Chinese always say here in Malaysia, cow team with authorities, the gatekeepers to get illegal things done. Now that we have the Section 17A in place, this middleman, the company can no longer say that they don't know about it, okay? Because even though this middleman is not under their payroll list, but still company can be held accountable for stealing for such practice. So as company, what they can and must do internally when bribery practice is discovered within the first 48 hours of discovery. Over to you, Robert. Thank you.
That's a good question, John. Thanks very much. The situation you described there was really a kind of a facilitation payment and small bribe payment, which, quite frankly, many companies just ignore. As far as Section 17 is concerned, it's really the accumulation of those activities over a period of time that makes it into an actual larger issue. But this morning's presentation really is not just about dealing with small bribes and facilitation payments. It's really to try and teach companies or give the companies the direction that they can take in relation to what to do when bribery and corruption has been discovered within the first 48 hours of discovery. And what should come out of this, everybody, is kind of a self-help kit that you can put to use straight away. Following my presentation, with a presentation about the systems that you should be putting in place to address things such as the Section 17A that you've just mentioned and other bribes and corruption activity that I'll be talking about in the first 30 to 40 minutes. So basically what we're looking at here is as per the title, we're looking at bribery and corruption the first 48 hours after discovery. Now, a number of years ago, some of you who are on this webinar actually know me personally. I was a police officer for 20 years investigating organized crime. And basically, the rule was if within 48 hours you didn't know or didn't have an idea of what had actually occurred, you had actually no chance of ever solving the crime. So that's where that title kind of comes from. So if you're in corporate and you have a whistleblower that gives you information of a potential act of corruption within your business, and you do nothing for a week, 2 weeks, or whatever, and we have seen it, then you're basically diminishing significantly the possibilities of you ever finding out what actually happened. So hopefully, after this session, you will have some tools in the toolbox that will actually help you do that. So let's kick off. Starting out with the damage that corruption and bribery causes to the global business community. And there you see a figure of 2.9 billion. Well, to be quite frank, I think that's an underestimation, because that sum comes from known cases, known incidents. But of course, what about all those incidents that to this day have been gone unnoticed? So I would say that 2.9 billion is something of a very conservative number. But what it does say is that this is not some small bribe kickback situation that's just a nuisance. It's a big global issue that needs addressing. And I think probably everybody on this webinar this morning understands that. The key elements, and I put in fraud and corruption here because quite often companies, corporates get mixed up between whether a fraud has been committed or there's been an act of corruption committed within their organization. So just for this slide, we'll talk about those elements together. But fraud and corruption, basically, the elements of the offense tend to be very similar. That's why we often get the confusion. For example, there's some form of deception, whether that deception is fixing up the books, overwriting, changing orders, and so on and so on, passing a potential winning bid to a bidder to ensure he wins and he gets a kickback. There's a deception. There's definitely an act of dishonesty. I can't think of any situation where everyone's involved in bribery that does it for honest means. I'm not sure about the audience, but I think we'd all be struggling to figure out where corruption and bribery had an element of honesty within it. I don't think there's any element of that, quite frankly. Intent. You don't get involved in corruption accidentally. You do it with a purpose. You do it what we call in the legal service with a definite decision to get involved in a mental state to get involved. It's not by accident. So it's always an intent. And the intent is usually to gain or loss. Now, usually we think of corruption as the fact that the individuals involved are doing it for financial gain or some form of gain. But we've investigated cases in the past where there's been corruption engaged in between parties with the intent to actually damage the company's reputation. Not just financial gain for the perpetrators, but to actually bring either a loss to the company they work for or to actually damage the reputation of the company they work for. Whenever we investigate corruption, the golden rule is always follow the money. Because at the end of the day, invariably, whilst I just talked about there could be an intent to cause loss to a company's reputation, there's invariably money involved. Yes, we have gifts, we have entertainment providers for corruption, but the vast majority of the time, it involves money. And if money is involved from an investigator's standpoint, if you're going to start investigating an allegation, a kickback allegation, look at the money to start with. Where's the money coming from? Where's the money going to, if at all? Okay. So basically what I'm going to do now, I'm going to look at several elements of bribery and corruption and why it occurs. These three elements are vitally important to help you understand in the first 48 hours where to put your resources in terms of investigation. So basically we have three elements. There's the incentive, the opportunity, and the rationalization of the people involved in the activity. Okay, so I'm going to break these down. Incentive. These are some of the issues we get. Personal financial obligations. A lot of these offenses are committed by managers, senior managers, or even owners of the company. Perceived or real adverse effects on reporting poor financial results. Personal financial situation is threatened by the entity's financial performance. Okay? These tend to be at the upper end of the issues of fraud and corruption, when it's more senior manager oriented, versus the introduction we had from Sumi, who was talking about facilitation payments and soft level payments and small payments at the gate of the factory to allow trucks in, things of that nature. Here we're talking serious senior level management kind of activity. Recurring negative cash flows while reporting a profit. The history has shown us many of these companies where this has actually happened. All kinds of corruption schemes going on whereby companies have inflated the amount of money they have in the bank or their financial positions, where they don't in fact have that position. And then there's a good old element, of course, is greed. Greed, and there it is. Everyone knows what that means, but this is an important element as to one of the incentives of why individuals get involved in bribery and corruption. Next bit, opportunity. Now this is a key important point for folks here on the call today, because the second half of the presentation this morning will be about, or will concern itself with, a significant portion of the opportunities that can be plugged, that can be stopped if you have an anti-bribery management system in place before an act of bribery takes place. But as far as opportunity is concerned, we look at ineffective monitoring of and or by management. In other words, no management oversight of what is occurring within the company. All the focus is on is profit. Susceptible to diversion. I believe we have an issue with the slides here, so. If you can hear, I'm sorry about this, we just seem to have a technical issue with the slideshow. Okay, I think we. Do I get the thumbs up? Are we back up and running okay with the slides? Okay. Apologize to everybody for that one. Let me see if we can run this through again, and hopefully let us know if this isn't working for you. But hopefully we've now got that particular book solved. Before the interruption, we were talking about the three elements involved in corruption activity, and we're moving on now. We've covered incentive, why people do it. Now we're moving into the opportunity component, and these are some of the elements that we've discovered during investigations over the years. Ineffective monitoring of by management, as I mentioned that earlier before, I think we had to change the slide process. Assets of the company or the business being susceptible to diversion. The financials of the business being based on estimates that involve judgment or uncertainties and thus difficult to corroborate and monitor. And again, second part of the session, when we talk about having a proper anti-bribery management system in place, it will address this kind of issue, that this doesn't occur. The company's got a business which has highly complex transactions, especially closing periods, quarters, end of year, mid-year, whatever. This is when corruption really can creep in very quickly and easily, because focus tends to be on what is occurring at the financials at the end of the year. And this, of course, is a very important one. Ineffective accounting information and control systems. Again, second part of this morning's session, you're going to be learning about the anti anti-bribery management processes and system, which can actually tackle this particular issue. And of course, hopefully shut this down as being a way of the corrupt individuals having an opportunity to make use of the system. Next one is rationalization. This one really comes from the reason why people do it. Rationalization is a very important element in the investigation and detection of corruption. And these are some of the ones we've come across in our work over the years. The suspect has said, basically says, everyone else was doing it, so why shouldn't I? And if you were involved in the pharmaceutical industry in China quite a number of years ago, then I think it's safe to say that everyone was doing it because it was just part of the culture of the way that industry operated. Some individuals have sat in front of us and said, I didn't even know it was a criminal activity to do that to the company. The company's got tons of money. Why is it a problem? It doesn't seem to be a criminal activity to me. Again, they're rationalizing this out in their own head. A couple more. I felt used and wanted revenge. This one normally occurs where people have been looked over for promotion or bonuses, and they say that it's sales or procurement, and they see an opportunity to make some money because they didn't receive what they thought was their due from the company and wanted to get revenge. I meant no harm and did no harm. Very similar to it's not criminal activity, but some people believe that if they're involved in corruption and it doesn't affect the bottom line of the company as much as they believe, then they've done no harm. The truck drivers that are paid money, the forklift driver in the company yard to unload trucks first, probably feels there's no harm being done whatsoever. But you accumulate that $1, $2, $3, $4 each time a truck's unloaded and pays to be unloaded quicker over 12 months, this becomes a significant sum. But in their mind, they think there's no harm. Usually this is management, it's very senior management. They did it to keep the business afloat. Again, very similar to everyone else who's doing it. Bribery is the norm in this type of business. And unfortunately, in a number of countries within Asia, that is definitely true. Certain industries where bribery is just the norm, and people move from one company to another in the same industry, and they take with them that attitude. What I did was entirely appropriate for someone in my position. I'm not really sure how you can actually rationalize that one, but we have heard it before. And finally, the usual, my employer didn't compensate me enough, so therefore I took what I thought was mine. And this is a very common one where, again, very similar to the person passed over for promotion, bonus, pay rise, and they think they should be compensated adequately. So they get involved in bribery and corruption. So these are the three elements that we need to consider when you start to look at investigate bribery in the first 48 hours. Who are the key players? Well, basically, the more complex the corrupt activity, invariably the more senior management are involved. So it's not something that occurs, as I say, with the forklift truck driver unloading trucks at the gate. It goes all the way to the top. And normally when it reaches the top, it's normally obviously senior management. And we've all seen the media articles over the years on that. Bribery and corruption perpetrated by outsiders, people outside the company. Basically, there are scams galore. Okay. But what we found within this region is that really business-related corruption activity most often involves some level of collusion between your staff, the company staff, our client staff, and external third-party vendors. And again, this is where such elements as due diligence on your third-party vendors is such a crucial piece of work to do if you want to stop corruption getting a foothold in the company, especially if you have large numbers of third-party vendors to your business. There are many ways in corruption is discovered. Customers complain about errors in statements. It's discovered accidentally. I suppose a customer, supplier, or employer is found to be phantom when the books are being checked. Rewriting or overwriting financial records, or procurement records, and so on. This is not a common one. Following the departure of a certain employee or a group of employees, and people start looking at the work that was done and trying to take over the work that was done by this team. And lo and behold, we find there's been irregularities in what's been going on, which invariably leads to an issue related to corruption. Not uncommon at all. Routine internal audits, many companies run their own audits, not just external, but internal audits for different departments. And often this is one of the ways in which corruption is identified. But basically, everyone on the call, ladies and gentlemen, in our experience, number one way in which corruption is discovered within a corporation is due to a whistleblower, anonymous letter, a complaint, or something of that nature. This is I would say, more than 70% of the cases that come for investigation will come as a result of whistleblower or anonymous letter. And one of the things we should be hearing about today is, of course, the importance of having within your corporation the capability for employees, customers, or third-party agents to anonymously, if necessary, but in total confidentiality,